welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I am Representative Gary Hopper, and this is Elizabeth Ropp,
Yes,
my left-wing nutcase friend, who I love very much. And Keith Howard is here from Hope for New Hampshire Recovery. We had him on last year, and you were
with Liberty House.
Liberty House.
Yep.
And then you escaped to the North Country for the summer.
No, for the winter, for 9 months.
9 months?
Beginning in September and going up through about May.
Really?
Yeah.
You were up there in the winter?
I was up there in the winter.
That is not very bright. That's a very cold location.
Well, you know, I was living inside an 8-foot by 10-foot converted motorcycle trailer.
Were you sending mail to people with little electronic devices in it that blew
No,
up?
I did. No, I completed a manifesto, though. If that's
manifesto?
if that's the direction you're going, yeah.
No, I was
It
thinking
was
of...
very sort of Walden, you know.
No,
Yeah.
I was...
You were where there was snow instead of rain.
Right. Yeah. So, and there were a couple of weeks where it didn't get above 25 below, but people live up there all the time. So.
No, I was thinking of Krasinski. What was
Right.
Krasinski's name?
Ted.
Ted Kaczynski, yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so that was my manifesto. That was the piece that I. So we need to work on our timing if we're going to be a comic duo.
Oh, yeah, that's probably true, yeah. We'll have to... Well, trio.
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 Pardon me.
Trio.
Elizabeth.
Right.
You can't leave her out because
Yeah.
she's super cool. Anyway, so how was your time up in the Great White North?
It was great. I had a chance to write. I had a chance to walk. Had a chance to meditate, and figure out what I wanted to do next in my life. And so back in March, I published an open letter to the universe that laid out some things I was.
Wait. So if you publish an open letter to the universe, where would you post such a thing?
Well, I run a
Because that's a big area to cover.
I run a blog, and then Manchester Inklink syndicates my stuff as well. And no, I got it.
Yes, no,
you
it
got
was-
the appreciative smile.
Okay, yeah, that was
I didn't
the-
want to guffaw in the middle of me talking mysticism.
Right, okay, good point.
Okay, so open letter to the universe that outlined what I was looking for in my next job, and weirdly, that had some pull on the internet, and I ended up getting job offers, or at least interest, from an organization in Chicago, one in Battle Creek, Michigan, and then in May, I was flown down to New Orleans to interview for a job down there.
Yeah.
But Melissa Cruz, who's currently the executive director,
She is awesome.
she is great. She is really,
She is
really
a
great.
wonderful human being.
She is, yes. And I don't say that simply because she signs my paycheck.
No, I say that even though I don't get any paychecks from her.
Okay.
Just because she's been on the show a bunch of times, and I was working when when they just got started. I think it might have been when they just got started or soon afterwards. They had a place on Canal Street.
Yep.
And I'd go down there periodically to see how they're doing, and I had her on the show and tried to drum up, some
Yep.
support and stuff like that. And she's just one of those people that is in it for the right reasons, working her butt off with no intention of actually profiting from it, which there is a lot of that in the business. And she is a breath of fresh air, and she's just wonderful.
Yeah. And you're right. There absolutely is a lot of that in the business.
There's
'Cause
a
when you
lot
have-
of it.
When you have the government saying, this is a problem, what we need to do is allocate a lot of money. Whenever you have money, you have people saying, how can I get more than my share of that money?
Exactly, yeah.
But anyway, so Melissa happened to see the piece that I'd written, and I was not real familiar with Hope before I started
really?
talking with Melissa. I mean, I knew what it was. I'd been through a tour, but wasn't incredibly familiar with it. And so once I talked with her, then Hope has a program up in Berlin. So Pittsburgh is like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes north of Berlin. Went down, visited that, and it's your show, so I should let you get a word in edgewise. Sorry about
It's
that,
Elizabeth's show. She just lets me.
Well, I guess my question is, when you put out your sort of manifesto and sort of your wish to the universe, were you
Yeah.
specifically wanting to stay in New Hampshire?
No, I was prepared to go anywhere in the world. I've got 3 daughters. who are all in their 20s and they're all self-sufficient. And so, yeah, I was prepared to relocate any place. In fact, the organization down in New Orleans, a place called Roots for Renewal, which is a great organization, but I don't think you have many Louisianan viewers, so I won't talk about what a great program it is.
Oh, we get a lot of play down in Louisiana.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
it's
famous
amazing.
down there.
We're
Yeah.
wicked famous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, we were.
I
invited
can't
to
go
one.
down. We can't go down there without.
Without being mobbed?
Right.
Oh yeah, it's terrible. I have to wear a mask and stuff just to keep so I can have some privacy.
Okay, that's the reason you wear a mask. Okay. got
Yes,
it.
yeah, exactly. That's my story.
Okay, stick to that.
I will. I will.
Okay. So, no, I didn't have any particular desire to stay in New Hampshire. And when Roots of Renewal flew me down to New Orleans, I wasn't even really sure whether Melissa's and my conversations were going to add up to anything. And
Right.
it was while I was down there that I made the decision that I really wanted to get involved with Hope, because it is completely a peer-to-peer recovery program. And that is how I got clean and sober and got off the streets, is by having other folks who had lived through similar experiences establish identification with me, and then reach out and offer me a solution to my alcoholism. And nothing against people that have letters after their names, whether those be, LADACs or licensed social workers or anything else. They all bring important things to the table. My experience has been that one addict talking to another addict, one drunk talking to another drunk, can establish a relationship almost immediately that can then lead to recovery.
You ran into that, and I don't know this. I just, from all the information I have, that you would have run into that in the Liberty House with veterans, because I know enough veterans to know that they tend not to open up to street people. They will open up to each other.
Right. Right. And so at Liberty House, there is the same kind of identification that takes place between veterans. And I was always very clear that I'm a veteran who used to live on the streets and steal mouthwash from dollar stores to drink for the alcohol.
What kind did you prefer? The
Well,
scope or?
No, I would go to dollar stores, and so it was definitely bottom shelf stuff. It
Oh,
was like
Listerine then.
generic.
Yeah,
mouthwash.
generic Listerine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
pretty bad.
But establishing that rapport
Right.
with vets who were newly in recovery, it was eyeball to eyeball
Yeah.
that things were accomplished, not with sitting in a sterile medical office and going through a checklist. And
Because I think it's kind of the same thing, like with the vets I've talked to. One of the issues they have is that there are things that have gone on in combat that A, they don't want to talk about, and B, legally they probably shouldn't talk about.
Right. yeah,
And it's the same kind of things with drug addicts and alcoholics, because they've done things that a street person would go, oh geez, that's horrible. Whereas another alcoholic or a drug addict response to the same comment or statement would be, there but for the grace of God go I.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and it's funny when you say that. When I was living on the street drinking mouthwash, I looked down on the guys who drank Sterno, because I had never gotten bad enough to be drinking Sterno. No matter how low people sink, they can always find someone who's
Isn't
worse
it
off.
weird that human nature is so much like that?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how bad you're doing, you can find somebody that you can say, well, I'm at least better than that person.
Right. Right. Well, and
It's pretty sad.
at least for my drinking history, I had to keep on seeking lower companions. Like professionally, I'd been in education and had run alternative schools throughout New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But then once I decided to drink the way that I wanted to drink, I lost jobs and then living on the street and continually seeking lower companions. And eventually, when the only lower companions you can find are the guys who are drinking Sterno, then I had reached my jumping off point.
Yes.
So,
So my question, when you were interviewing in New Orleans for the
Yeah.
Roots Recovery, and did you interview, and did you go to, you were in Michigan also?
I did not. I did phone interviews in Michigan and Chicago,
Okay.
but went to New Orleans.
Did you find that there were things about that program that you really liked and that you'd want to bring here to New Hampshire for Hope?
Well, Roots of Renewal
Roots of
is a different kind of program. It's a wicked cool program, and now I'm going to tell you, Elizabeth, a little bit about it. Even though this will probably get you lots of fan mail from Louisiana, and Gary hates having to answer fan mail.
Yeah,
He gets so much of it.
I know.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Okay. Roots of Renewal was started by a Tulane University student about 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And what she did was recognize there's a ton of housing stock that's uninhabitable now. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah, from Katrina.
Right,
Right.
right.
You know, and the mid-city portion of New Orleans has the highest incarceration rate for young African American males in the county that has the highest incarceration rate for young African American males, in the state that has the highest incarceration rate for young African American males. So what she has done is created a program where when men are being released from prison, and that's primarily Algiers prison, the state prison there, and are returning, instead of having them go back to their old haunts and go back to the lives that they used to live, Hope purchases abandoned properties and then
Or
rehabs them, training those returning prisoners in construction trades.
Right.
And then once they have gone through 4 months of training, they've worked out a relationship with the local building unions so that those prisoners can come on as apprentices. And then they, sink or swim by their own skills. But for the first 4 months that they are out of prison, they need to be at Hope every day. And this is a condition of their parole or their probation, is that they need to report to Hope every day, and it's completely voluntary.
You're saying
So-
Hope, do you mean Roots?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Roots of Renewal. Thank
Okay.
you very much. Need to report there. They get paid a living wage while they're doing that, and then the program is completely funded by the profits of selling houses that have been rehabbed.
No way.
Great.
Yes,
And
so
it
it is-
works?
It does,
Yeah.
and I know this is a family program, but it is a liberal and conservatives' dream of moisture. Instead of because it does reach
Could you
out.
rephrase that so even I would understand it?
Okay, wet dream. So you asked for it. You're the host. So, but what it does is works with the most downtrodden folks, yet it encourages them to get to work. Success is measured by them becoming employable and then going into the workforce. And it's not funded by government grants. It's funded by the profit motive, because the work that those men have done have increased the value of abandoned property so that now it can be sold. That is pretty amazing.
Well, it's also it's one of the problems I see with our current system with treating with drug and alcohol. Because currently what we do is somebody is basically near death. They throw them in a 28-day program. You could teach them karate for 28 days and they would still feel the same way when they
Right.
come out.
Right.
Because when they come out, they feel like they're physically feeling better.
Yep.
They've got direction. They've got
Yeah.
motivation. They're going to go to meetings. They're going to do this. They're going to do this. They're going to do this. I've got this. I've got this. Then they throw them right back into the same house they were living before.
Right.
Within 2 days, they're back hanging out with their friends because they missed them.
Right.
And within a week,
They're
they're doing
using
drugs again.
Yeah.
But that model takes those same people and puts them in a different environment.
Right.
so that they're not stuck back with the same people, because that's what they would do. If you put somebody back in that same environment, it's almost impossible to overcome the odds.
Right. And
So that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and so to anger both of you, I am a moderate. I am not a conservative or a liberal. I am a moderate, which means that everybody hates me. But I really.
Well, I know I do, but I didn't know. I don't know that
Yeah.
Elizabeth does.
Oh no, she will grow too.
Oh, okay, okay.
But this is the model for the future. And just like when I was at Liberty House, we stepped away from all federal funding because we did not want to allow residents to use drugs and alcohol.
What? The federal funding?
Oh, you don't, okay, so,
Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah,
You did
yeah.
a lot at Liberty House, so here.
okay, so when I was at Liberty House, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which had provided about 15% of our budget, changed its rules so that folks living in HUD housing had to be allowed to use drugs and alcohol while they were living in
Illegal
HUD.
drugs and alcohol, or just legal drugs and alcohol?
You wouldn't need to have a policy that says feel free to shoot heroin because heroin is against the law, but you could not have any consequence for people coming up dirty on a drug test.
Okay.
And the theory behind this is based on a philosophy which is called housing first, which does have a lot of sense to it, which says if somebody's living on the street, if somebody is homeless, they first of all need housing, and then where I think the naivete comes in is that then the assumption is once people are safely housed, they will choose to get clean and sober. Right. And the model that this is based on is out of St. Louis, and it was a really great program that happened to have it so that for every 2 residents, there was a full-time case manager who was working with them, encouraging them. The problem is that HUD has adopted this whole cloth without providing all of those supports.
Right,
So it
yeah.
basically becomes feel free to use while you're here. So
Wow.
so this would have been back in 2015, August of 2015. I went to the Liberty House board and said, well, we need to step away from this. And the board, being responsible, said, we can't just step away from 15% of our operating budget. And I said, well, we have to, or we will no longer exist as a Liberty House that we want to be involved with.
Right.
And they said, I'm sorry, Keith, we just can't do that. And I said, I am certain that if we step away from this money and we make it public why it is that we've stepped away from this money, that our donations will increase enough to offset the missing federal money.
Yep.
And they said, Keith, that's really nice that you say that. And then the topper was, I said, I'm willing to take a 50% cut in pay until that money is made up.
Yep.
So they then agreed. So in January of 2016, published an op-ed in the Union Leader that outlined what I've just described. It got picked up by Fox 25
So
out of
that's
Boston.
why I didn't know. I don't read.
Okay.
But you watch Fox.
It was on Fox 25.
No, I don't actually
Not
watch
on
Fox.
Fox News, but on the local Fox affiliate. And all of a sudden, money started pouring in from all over the country. And by the end of February, I was back to full pay.
Yeah.
So,
Which, that's really cool.
yeah.
So anyway, before we use up the entire hour. So what's going on at Hope now? Because now they last year, this is before your tenure there.
Yeah.
They actually had to close down a bunch of their satellite
Yeah.
things. So what's happening with Hope?
Okay. So I'm going to preface what I'm going to say by saying that I don't really know anything. Okay.
Oh man, I can identify with that.
Okay.
You probably didn't know that I volunteer there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
No.
I do. I've been volunteering for a year now.
Oh, that is wonderful. What do you do there?
So I'm an acupuncturist, and I'm not in recovery.
Oh, are you the ear lady? That
Yes, I am.
Oh, but you weren't there the other day.
I was there yesterday, but I was not there the other day.
Okay. I'm sorry. What's that?
The ear lady.
The
I
ear
like
lady,
that
yes.
label.
She does ear. No, I didn't. I mean, I knew that there was somebody who does ear acupuncture, and we sometimes call that piercing, right?
No. But I'm glad that you mentioned peer-to-peer, because this was my fight with the licensing board. They feel that acupuncture should only be done by acupuncturists, but when ear acupuncture was developed as a protocol, as a treatment for substance misuse disorder and behavioral health, it was developed by peer counselors. And so it should be in the hands of peer counselors, and that's what my law does, but still not out of rulemaking. So Hope is one place where I offer treatment so people can experience it, and then also share information and advocate for it.
So you break the law.
No, I didn't break the law. I changed the law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No,
okay.
we have a law.
She's nuts.
Okay.
In spite of all my attempts to try to thwart her bill, it still passed the House and Senate.
Are you on the board of acupuncture licensing?
Yes, I get. That's how I can fund my reelection campaign.
Gotcha. Because there's so much money in it.
There is so much money in it. Yeah.
So, as for Hope, I can tell you what's going on now. I visited all the programs.
How many are left?
3 are left.
Okay.
We got-
Manchester, which is by far the largest one.
Yeah.
Then Franklin and Berlin.
Okay.
Okay.
So those are still open.
Those are still open. Yep.
Okay.
And as I understand it, the primary reason that the Franklin and Berlin programs are still open is because the people in those communities took to the streets and said, we recognize that we have a need for peer-to-peer recovery, and Hope meets that need, and then they applied political pressure in order to be able to keep those programs open. The
Locally?
It was local pressure, but it was state money that was brought in.
Oh,
to
okay.
bear.
So I thought maybe the local government actually started helping out and trying to
Not so much. No, it was more local voters
calling
spreading
their
that way.
legislators and saying, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Yeah, and honestly, taking to the streets. I mean, if you stand at, like, if you're in a town the size of Berlin, which when I was a kid used to have like 25,000 and was a city, it still is. It still has a city form of government, but there are only like fewer than 9,000 people living there.
Oh, really?
now.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful location.
It is. It is. But there's no industry there because the paper mills left.
Yeah.
And, well, okay, we could get into
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
about North Country development and what that's going to take. And I could tell you that I think that putting in broadband, incredibly fast internet, and then encouraging millennials who can't afford to live within 40 miles of Boston to relocate up to the North Country where it's so beautiful if they could telecommute. But I'm not going to talk about that because I'm talking about Hope.
Right. That's a good idea that we shouldn't really talk about because we're talking about hope.
Right.
Right.
So Hope is completely based on the peer-to-peer model.
Yep.
So each Hope program has a variety of different meetings held in it. There are AA meetings, NA meetings, Emotions Anonymous meetings, Overeaters Anonymous meetings, but then also
I've never even heard of that. Emotions what?
Emotions Anonymous. As I understand it, that is for folks who have difficulty regulating their emotions, whether that be mania or
Republicans.
depression.
It's a Republican program
It could very well be a Republican program,
right.
yes.
to
Yeah.
cure us.
Yeah. Do you want to talk politics? Because I can
No,
talk.
no, no,
Okay.
no. No, you're here to talk about hope, but
I know.
I just can't help myself. So.
Okay. So then also smart recovery, the 3 principles which have grown out of Farnham. Then today, I just went to a meeting today, the first one I've ever heard of, from an organization called Recovery International, which is based on the work of a psychiatrist from the 1940s by the name of, it doesn't matter, Abraham Low, I believe, Low.
Okay.
But there are lots and lots of different paths to recovery.
There's the Dharma punks.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
That's
The
really
what?
neat. It's now under a different name, but I learned about the Dharma punks. I went to one of their meditations.
Yeah, so there
Dharma
yeah,
punks?
there's also meditation. I mean, there are lots of different ways to support people in recovery that all come down to, I want to support you as a human being.
Right.
And the problem as somebody in recovery that I have with using the medical model for everything is that it's always that the counselor or therapist is up here, and because she or he has attended classes and like met qualifications, I'm not anti-intellectual at all, but there is this sense that they're here looking down on the person that has a problem and trying to diagnose and then remediate that problem. That works okay if you've got toe fungus. It doesn't work so well when you're talking about establishing rapport with someone who has a substance use disorder.
Okay.
But that's just my personal opinion.
I just thought of possible legislation, and I don't know. One of the advantages of a doctor or a therapist is they have immunity from disclosing what you've said in a counseling session.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true for peer counselors.
I suspect that it's not. Although it seems to me that I did read recently that specifically when it comes to the Alcoholics Anonymous sponsor-sponsee relationship, that is being treated like a priest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I believe so, but since I can't quote it, don't quote me.
That's an interesting thing to look into, because if people knew that they could unload, so to speak, it'd be a lot easier for them.
Well, and what
It would also apply, if you did it right, it would also apply to peer-to-peer work with people, vets. Mm-hmm. Because vets have a really tough time, because I know a vet who wants to do his autobiography,
Yeah.
but he has to wait till he's almost dead. Because if he disclosed what he actually did,
Yeah.
he could still go to jail for life.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Sorry. Just that this thought just crossed my mind, which
Well, okay.
is really
while we're-
unusual for me to actually have a thought that crosses my mind.
While
So I
we're
thought I'd
throwing out
celebrate it.
ideas,
Yeah.
about 10 days before the 2016 election, I had a chance, along with about 10 other people, to sit down with Donald Trump. This is
Yeah.
back when it seemed as though Hillary was definitely going to be president.
Yeah.
And the issue was the opioid crisis
Yep.
in New Hampshire. And I brought along a proposal for him that had the headline, I don't know if you remember, when he was talking to African American groups, he would often say, "What do you have to lose? Your communities are no good, your education is no good, your families are falling apart. Vote for me, what do you have to lose?" And so that was the title of my proposal, but it was suggesting that when it comes to treatment for opioid addiction, most folks do not need to have 28 days of full medical, round-the-clock medical support.
Right.
And even most people who are detoxing from opiates don't need to be in a hospital setting, and it would be so much cheaper to have there be peer-to-peer, community-based detox centers set up than to have to treat every single person as though they need to be in a full medical facility. And when as it happened,
That's really cool.
Yeah, well, as it happened, I was being kind of sneaky because I knew where at that point, candidate Trump was going to be sitting. So I took my proposal and set it right where he was going to be sitting. He did pick it up, did look at it, folded it, put it in his jacket pocket. It may still be there. So if he pulls it out, I think
That's a really cool idea, because it is, like you said. I know that some people from Hope for Recovery. I won't name the names because I don't want to get them in trouble. But they tried to use tried to arrange so that they could with detox people at Amber's place,
yeah.
and they wanted to work with the people with methadone.
Yeah.
So they could just use just enough methadone for I think the reasonable amount of time would be like a week.
Okay, so to titrate
Just
them
kind
off
of
it.
taper them right off
Yeah.
really quickly, and then done with methadone.
Yeah,
But there's no money in that.
right. Well, and that
Which
is
wherein lies the problem? Unless there's money in it for the drug companies, who they will fight it tooth and nail.
well, and the drug companies certainly bear a lot of responsibility, but there is a treatment industrial part of our world, so that everything follows the medical model, and so the cash cow for treatment places is Medicaid funding. And Hope does not necessarily qualify for Medicaid funding because it's all peer-to-peer support. And so since the state looks to Medicaid funding to work with the opiate problem, doesn't necessarily steer money to places that are not going to be able to bill Medicaid. And
Right.
for Hope to be able to bill Medicaid, what we would need to do is offer clinical supervision of peer support, which is impossible. It's like saying, what I'm going to do is build a house on Jell-O. You just can't do it because
We were talking about Jell-O earlier.
We were,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Jello wrestling.
I'm glad that I
actually.
could have a callback to your earlier conversation.
Yeah,
That's-
yeah.
As you
just-
were saying, it doesn't work to have clinical supervision for peer-to-peer counselors.
Right. It's two very different things. You know, like I have, as an educator, received clinical supervision with particularly difficult students. But as somebody in recovery working with other folks in recovery, I might go and talk with other people of my choosing and say, listen, this is, I'm working with Tony over here. This is what I've been suggesting. Do you have any suggestions to me? But it's not the same thing as clinical supervision where somebody with letters after her or his name has to sign off saying that they have actually supervised a peer.
Right.
And we don't want peers to be supervising other peers because it really is.
Well, if it's a supervisory position, it's no longer a peer anyway. Period.
Right.
It's a
And
contradiction.
So the whole notion of Hope is to have as little hierarchy as possible. That people have different roles in the organization, but we don't want to have a top-down, highly structured place because everything needs to be eyeball to eyeball. When I am meeting somebody who's just walking in for the first time, I'm just another drunk. I don't typically wear a coat and tie dressed up to make you look bad, Gary.
You did a fine job too, by the way. I
But
just
that was
wanna
like
say
shooting
that.
fish in a barrel with
Right,
the costume
yeah,
you've got on. so.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, no, it's this is Johnny Cash.
Oh,
It-
that's
it-
pretty cool.
Yeah, it is wicked
Yeah.
cool. I don't know what you're thinking, but Johnny Cash is pretty hard to outdo. So.
Yeah, no, Johnny Cash was very cool. I agree.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not going
Never-
to get it. No, we're not going to
Please.
play the dozens over clothing choices. So
I'm a pretty sensitive guy too. You don't want to hurt my
no,
feelings.
yeah, my feelings would be hurt if I had any. So
Yeah.
so where were we?
So it sounds like you're pretty much keeping Melissa's vision going, because
Yes.
Melissa's talked to me a lot about this and her struggles with licensing boards,
Yeah.
and I've been sharing my struggles with licensing boards and passing legislation. So it sounds like so you're kind of you're gonna what you're doing is gonna be pretty continuous with what's already going on.
Oh, yeah.
So do you envision anything new that you'll be bringing in?
Money. Money would be a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what I would really like to do is be an ambassador to the recovery community, not going to AA groups or smart recovery groups, but going to individuals who are in recovery, who have come back from devastating places in their lives and are now doing okay financially, and say, like my ideal would be
Pay it back, so to speak.
would be 1,000 people giving $250 apiece instead of 250 people giving $1,000 apiece, or God forbid, 25 people giving $10,000. I want it to be spread out, but there are a lot of us in recovery who now could be giving back, and a place like Hope that does provide a chance for folks who have a hankering to get clean and sober to meet some people that can help them in a variety of ways get clean and sober. I think there's almost a spiritual and moral imperative on those of us who are in recovery to give back.
Right.
I mean, I've never told anybody this, Gary, so now I'm hoping you're
I
going
bring
to
the
take this
best
to your
out.
grave. Yes.
Yeah.
For the past 5 or 6 years, I've made it a personal mission to give away 10% of my income, not to churches, but to nonprofits that I particularly value.
Yeah.
And I would like to see that kind of thinking become a norm for people who are financially stable. I'm not saying, you've been clean and sober for 2 years and you're still working at that $12 an hour job. You need to take care of your responsibilities. But lots of us have been rescued from the pits of hell, and we damn well owe something to the people who rescued us.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think there are enough people in recovery that have benefited so greatly that coming up with money to help a place like that's actually working with the same kind of system.
Right.
It seems reasonable.
Yep. So that is my vision, is that within 3 or 4 years, we can be independent.
How do you get the message out? That seems like the hard part.
Well, here I am
Yeah.
talking with you.
Oh yeah, but that's only going to hit the people in New Orleans. So
Okay, right. Very good. Very good. You're not half as dumb as you seem.
thank you. I think that would be a hard for me to breathe if that
Okay.
were the case.
Yeah. So I also have, so for the 9 months that I was up in Pittsburgh, I
Yeah.
mentioned that I had a blog. That has gotten a large readership.
Okay.
Much larger than I would ever have guessed. And so I will be reaching out to that readership, not looking so much for them to make donations unless that's the category they fall into, but to spread the word, the notion of tithing for recovery. Because there are many of us who are not church folks or temple folks or mosque folks, but still have had a spiritual experience that has made our lives worth living.
Yep.
And so, whether it's 5% or 7% or 10%, that's all kind of arbitrary. But the notion that people in recovery, if at all possible, should be supporting recovery organizations, I think that's very reasonable.
Yeah. I just getting the message out is going to be the tough part. Obviously, doing the show should get you easily compensate for any shortfalls you might have.
Right.
But
Yeah, and I do have some surprises up my sleeve, and I do have some writing ability. So I am
Are
not
you interested in like a Jello wrestling competition to bring attention to the?
with you.
No, with Elizabeth.
No,
I am a Jello
no-
wrestling champion.
She is a Jello wrestling.
Okay,
We've
No, thank you, Elizabeth. No offense to you. I have no desire to wrestle anybody in Jello.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Fair enough.
Okay.
it seems like
But if I were going to, Elizabeth, I would love to wrestle you in Jello, but I just not something that's
No,
in my field
no.
of expertise.
So do you plan on starting a blog for Hope on a website or?
Well, that's a difficult thing because I have got a distinctive and smart-ass voice. And so it's one thing to publish things on my own platform using that voice of mine. It's another thing to be representing a nonprofit. Like
Yeah.
here, I can talk with you, but when you put things in writing, they stay there forever.
Right.
And I own my words. I stand by anything I've ever published. I may say, boy, I was a jackass to have published that, but I
Right.
own it. I don't know that me writing for a Hope publication or website or whatever would make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I think I can do a lot more good being like, you can probably relate to this. I think of myself as being a mystical clown, and
I think Gary also feels like he's a mystical clown.
right.
Yeah.
And so being a mystical clown is great if you have your own circus. But to go into somebody else's
once you're
show-
representing somebody else's environment, then
Right.
then that same the same attitude and the same comments and stuff like that can be deliberately
Right.
misconstrued and bring folly to whoever you're representing.
right.
Sure, gotcha.
Yep. So it's a creative idea, but yeah. So just really hoping to be able to expand the base, get away from government funding, because it's been my experience that too many nonprofits end up chasing after this year's funding source and pretzelizing themselves, if that's
Pretzelizing.
Yeah.
if that is a word, to fit the funding.
There's a lot
to
of
match-
logic to pretzelizing.
Well, the problem is that you
Get the
end up-
reference?
I mean, you
The pretzel logic? Yeah.
pretzel. Yeah, I'm a Steely Dan fan. I know.
Okay. Good,
Okay,
good.
but Katie lied, so we
Right,
can
that's
keep
true.
going deeper and deeper if you want to.
No,
But it's
I'm good.
amazing. Everyone is talking about the $22 million coming, but it needs to be spent by September,
Right.
and that just seems so hasty. Everyone's going to be fighting for it, and then it has to be gone by September. It just, you think you want to review things and be methodical and make sure everyone has a place at the table to present their case. And
Right. Yeah, and
You know what would be cool is if they just gave gave each legislator a check. Right? No, not for personal. So they,
okay.
yeah, like to send you
so
on
that they
vacation.
could give it to the people in the community that were actually doing something, as opposed to ending up in the same coffers of the people who are really good at sucking money from the government, because that's where it ends up. We had a lady you on this show. I don't know. I got to get her back on, and I'm going to forget her name because I get brain damage. But she started a home for people in recovery
Okay.
back many years ago, and she came to her understanding of things during the when AIDS came out, and she had homes for people in recovery and people who were at AIDS and things like that, and it was all spiritually motivated, by God, because she quickly learned, because she was a nurse, that's her link into it, because she could help people, that if she took money from the government, she would fail. And the reason she would fail is because that's all she ever saw was somebody come up with some great new idea. They open up a place. The overhead is kind of astronomical because the government comes in and says, well, you have to have a nurse, you have to have this,
Right.
you have to have this, you have to have this, and this.
Right.
Okay, I'll do all that. So you get all that into place, you get the home, and the next thing you know, somebody else comes up with another great idea. Your money dries up, and then you're closed.
Yep.
And so she just said, "The heck with it! I'm going to let God, like almost like you did with Liberty House.
Yeah.
As going to leave this up to God." And God, now she's got like 3 places in Lowell where she takes in people, and she does well.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not getting rich, but obviously that's not her motive anyway.
Right.
Because the government is like making a deal with the devil.
Well, you end up needing to tailor what you do to match the request for proposals that you've been funded under.
Right.
And pretty quickly you can lose sight of what you originally wanted to do because the intricacies of the funding change over time.
Yep.
And if you keep on chasing after that money instead of chasing after a vision, you end up losing both.
I mean, if you just take the example
Okay,
of,
wait a second. That was almost poetic. I would like to write that down, Gary. So let me write.
you can watch the show later. It's on,
Oh, right.
And just
Oh, there you go. It's
get a
already
transcript.
recorded.
We can, yeah.
Okay.
But no, if you watch what my new favorite co-host, because Eric's not here, did up in Concord, right? All she wanted to do was allow people for their peers to give them acupuncture in their ear. It's not invasive. There's nothing horrible about it, and it helps people with symptoms of withdrawal and everything
All
else.
stages of recovery,
Right.
mental health,
That's
behavioral health.
all she wanted to do.
Yep.
It was simple. So she had a bill, and it went through the legislature, and then the Senate tried to kill it, and somebody else tried to kill it, somebody else tried to kill it. Now, when was that? It was passed when?
It was signed by the governor on July 1st, or maybe it was
this year or
last year.
last
Yeah, yeah.
year.
So we're still in rulemaking.
Okay.
So it was signed into law after she went through hurdles getting this through. Something so simple,
Yeah.
so clear, so concise, and it still isn't in practice because the
rulemaking takes-
government can't allow.
No. The government should not get the blame for this. The Board of Acupuncture Licensing should.
Okay.
No, that is not true.
Well, they are a part of the government? Or
No, they are not.
Okay.
Well, they're under the state, so maybe.
There are a rule-making thing called GELCAR, and they should be exempt from pressure from places like the acupuncture board or anything else. They should be looking out for the people, but they do not.
Okay.
They do not. They're influenced by these different groups that come in, and they don't do the people's work. And it's mind-bogglingly horrible. So your desire to try to keep hope detached from government oversight is really good.
Okay, just so we're clear.
Not oversight's probably not the right word.
Right, funding is
Funding.
what I'm talking about.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
Of
We're
course
talking about
we,
rules.
yeah, of course we want to follow whatever the, rules
I'd
and
go
regulations
for it. Just go
are.
for it.
But as we get rules in place, we have to make sure that the rules are not strangling the law that was
Right.
passed. That's the point.
It will.
Okay, so with the acupuncture being good for people at any stage of recovery, is that a one-time thing or is it a course of treatment over time?
So it depends on where it's being used. I would say that it's not a one-time thing, and that's why you want to make it accessible. And that's why we got one of the best laws in the country next to Louisiana and also Wyoming. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
really, Louisiana?
Louisiana has a really
Okay.
great law, and I worked with an expert who helped pass the Louisiana law.
Okay.
And I would say really the only reason
That was because
why.
she was on this show, and it
Right.
Yeah,
brought
that's,
that.
it-
yeah.
and because Gary, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
That's all-
mainly-
the whole thing
mainly
passed 'cause
me.
Gary.
Mainly me.
So, ear acupuncture was developed in the South Bronx in the middle of a heroin epidemic in the 1970s by members of the Black Panther Party, actually.
Okay.
So, it was used for detox. So it was originally called AcuDetox or acupuncture detox. But really what it is it's a mental health treatment. So I have seen it work really well for people who are in acute withdrawal, but also for anyone who is at any stage of recovery, and not necessarily even in recovery, people who are experiencing anything mental health related. It helps to relieve anxiety, it helps to calm the mind, it helps to build inner resilience, which is why I keep showing up at Hope every week to offer it to anyone who wants to try it. So I have people that I've treated for months now, or I have people who I might see for several months at a time, and then they move on probably because they got a job and they
Yep.
are not around during the day. and I try to make it to meetings so I can present information
Yeah.
and peer in some of the pilot studies that have been done. And the expert that I worked with, who lives in Orford, New Hampshire, she trained a lot of different volunteers on the ground at Ground Zero because the treatment seemed to be really effective for treating post-traumatic stress for first responders and for
Okay.
other New Yorkers after 9/11.
And so has this been looked at by the scientific community? I
So, yeah, we have a
there
lot
are
of-
longitudinal studies that.
So studies are a really good question. We have a lot of pilot programs in there and collected data from pilot programs.
Okay.
There's not a lot of money to fund
Right.
studies in acupuncture. There's
Okay.
but think of all the studies that have been done on opioid pain medication. So really when people say, show me these studies and show them the evidence, I can give them a lot of information that they can look at, but I also want to say, sit down and try a treatment and tell me how you feel. And I've, collected a lot of quotes from people over time, and,
Yeah.
I've showed, and I'll show everyone documentaries and I'll show everyone information, but really, you really, once you experience it, you'll definitely see the benefit.
So when will you be at Hope again?
I'll be there on Tuesday.
Tuesday, what time?
I'm
Roughly?
generally there from like 9:30 to noon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I will try to be there and let you put a hole in my ear.
Yes, that sounds great.
Good.
I
Many
love that.
holes, actually.
Is it many holes?
The treatment is 5 points in the ear, but it doesn't have to be all 5 points. And over the years, many people who've been trained by the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association and certified by the National Acupuncture Detoxification Association.
That's quite a mouthful. Maybe if
It
they
is.
changed their
NADA.
name.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
probably the big-
Yes.
trained by NADA.
Okay.
And they're NADA trained.
Okay, so
Nada-
nada means nothing in Spanish.
It's correct.
So trained by nothing.
Right.
And you're not evidence-based. I can see some problems here, Elizabeth.
So let me tell you this. So I always again say, look at evidence-based medicine right now and look at the crisis that we're in. How's that evidence-based medicine working for you? But in programs where ear acupuncture or NADA was used for people who were on, for a mental health program in Waco,
Yeah.
Texas, people were taking less medication and coping better. So what we have is medicine-based evidence.
Okay. And so I told you that I'm a moderate. So what I'm going to say is I prefer evidence-based medicine. However, I can see no harm that can accrue to a patient by doing this.
Right.
It's not as though you're saying, what we're going to do is go in and remove part of the kidney and we
Right.
think that will make them feel better.
This
Clearly,
is non-invasive and it's safe.
Right.
And I'll
And
bring
so-
I'll bring you all the studies.
okay. And so even if it has no effect other than a placebo effect, the placebo effect is still real and it does no harm. So go with my blessing as far as I'm concerned. Not that you needed that whatsoever.
Right. Sure. Oh, and one thing I will share with you guys, when I was with Kelly Riley from
Yeah.
Hope, and we went to an event at Southern New Hampshire University, she introduced me to Lindy Sue Keller from the Department of Drug and Alcohol Services, who told me that she wanted to see an ADS law, an acupuncture detoxification specialist law in New Hampshire for at least 8 years.
Oh,
So I was happy to tell her, well, New Hampshire now has one of the best laws.
nice.
So, just to give you some background, I didn't know that until just last month that this was something that was wanted in New Hampshire by people who
Okay.
are in positions of authority.
Nice.
So we only have a couple minutes.
Okay.
What can people do to help Hope for Recovery?
The best thing.
Where do they? Where are the contact information? Things
Oh,
like that?
you want the boring stuff. Okay.
Wicked boring. Make it
Okay.
as boring as you can.
Okay, so Hope is located at, I believe it's 193, although the number could be wrong, on Wilson Street, right where Hoyt's Furniture was for 85 years. Do you know where that is?
I do. It's right off. It's on Valley, the corner of
Right.
Valley and.
Valley and Wilson, right past the police station if you're coming up from Elm Street.
Yeah, if you make it past the police station, it's just on the right.
Right. I know that that's a challenge
It is
for you.
tough. It is.
Yeah, and so stopping by, a minute ago, Elizabeth was talking about how you really need to experience acupuncture,
Ear acupuncture.
ear acupuncture, in order to understand. I would strongly encourage anyone in the community to come by Hope. We're open from 9 in the morning till between 8 and 9 at night. Come by.
Every day?
Every day. No, weekends it's noon to 8, I believe.
Okay.
But come by, come on in, say hey. There is a cafe there, so you can order yourself a cup of coffee or a soda. There's a ping pong table. There's chess. Typically, there are small meetings going on in small rooms, and then there are larger meetings that sometimes take place in bigger rooms. But more than that, grab a cup of coffee, sit down and talk with somebody who is just getting clean or sober, and just talk with them about their experience.
Right.
You know, I'm not here to make a pitch for money for Hope, but I really believe in what we're doing, and I believe that if members of the community come in and experience that, that they will walk away saying, damn, that's a really cool thing that's going on
Yeah,
in
it
our
is a very
community."
cool thing. You got you like Melissa's been working on that for so long, and to see that it keeps chugging along. I hope it gets bigger, and helps a lot more people. Keith, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, we're shaking hands, okay?
I'll shake your
Elizabeth!
hand after the show.